What should the Oklahoma City Thunder do with Josh Giddey? Is benching him the answer? We'll tell you why it's not on today's Locked On Thunder podcast.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by PrizePicks, we're diving into the Thunder's starting lineup and rotation. What should the Thunder do with Josh Giddey? Is benching him the right answer? And if it's not, what's the solution? Plus your mailbag questions, like more questions on the rotation and who's on the Mount Rushmore of Thunder hate. So a lot to get to in today's show. We're also going to preview this in-season tournament matchup with the Sacramento Kings. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA, and your first deposit will be matched up to $100. The Thunder right now are in the first stretch of an incredibly exciting season. Not yet 10 games into the year, but the burning question around Bricktown is, should the Thunder ground Giddey? Should they bench him? Should they change anything about what they're doing revolving around Josh Giddey's slow start? The simple answer is no. Look, this is only continuing to grow after he was benched down the stretch of that game against Cleveland. But that's a Mark staple. That's what Mark does. He did that last year whenever there were not as many great options to put in over Josh Giddey, but they were the hot hand that night. He's going to do it again if Josh Giddey continues to struggle. But at the end of the day, we're 8 games into the season. And this season, through 8 games, Josh Giddey is averaging 12 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He's averaging 39% from the floor, 23% from 3, and 77% at the line. Last year, in the first 8 games, Josh Giddey was averaging 13 points, up 1, 6 rebounds, the same, 5 assists, up 1. He shot much better comparatively, 42% to 39% from the floor, and then he shot 28% from deep, which was better, of course, than what he's shooting right now from beyond the arc. But ultimately, it's the same impact that he had on the Thunder through 8 games last year as he's having this year. But he was able to end it on a career high in his second season with 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists a night, going for 48% from the floor and 32% from 3. So despite his struggling early on last year, he was able to get it going. And in the last 2 games, I felt like the decision-making was a lot better from Josh Giddey. Mark even agreed whenever I asked him post-game about that assumption. And the biggest issue I found with Josh Giddey's game, especially against Cleveland and down the stretch against Atlanta, is that the frustration is not only growing, but it's showing up on the court from Josh Giddey. And I think that you just have to give yourself some grace a little bit if you're Josh Giddey and not let your frustration kind of rule or dictate your game in any way. Of course, you'd much rather see the shots go in than not. But a lot of the time, especially against Cleveland, there's nothing that you would change besides having the ball go in. And sometimes the pumpkin does not find the patch. So the burning question is, should the Thunder bench Josh Giddey? What's the solution if not? First and foremost, you have to let a guy play, and you have to let him play through this stretch. And this is a 10-game stretch that has not even reached the 10th game yet of the first 10 games of the season. And so we have to put into perspective that he also started slow last year. And then it's a 10 out of 82 game stretch. This is an incredibly long season. And if he started out with a great, excellent peak of his powers 10-game stretch and then had the next 10 games be terrible, it would not feel as dire as it feels right now, because this is the only thing you have to point to about this season. But I don't think that the Thunder should bench him, and I would venture to guess that the Thunder will have the exact same starting five for the remainder of the season as long as those 5 guys are healthy. I think that every time that the 5 guys are healthy, you're going to see them at the jump ball circle, and it's going to be SGA, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, J-Dub, and Chet. Now, as we've seen this season already, the closing lineup is a huge variable. That is going to change night to night. That is going to change based upon who has the hot hand, based upon who's working their matchups, and who you're playing against and what you need in that situation. If you need a quick comeback, you're going to lean more offensive focused. If you want to lock down defensively, you're going to have a defensive focus. And then there's going to be guys throughout the course of a game who just are on fire, and you have to stick with them even at the cost of somebody in that starting 5. So we already know that the closing lineup is a variable. But it's no fun to just say let the guy play through it, which is the right answer. So I'll grant you this. I would be interested in kind of a different wrinkle, a quicker stagger for the Thunder, similar to how Houston played with CP3 and Harden, where like they started the game together, but fairly quickly you staggered those 2 guys to allow them to maximize what they do best on the floor. Even if it's just as quick as like 3 minutes into the game, benching Josh Giddey for either Isaiah Joe or Cason Wallace, depending on what you need the most of. Because, of course, with Isaiah Joe, you're very offensive heavy, but he's not a turnstile defensively for Isaiah Joe. With Cason Wallace, you're very defensive heavy, but he also makes a high impact offensively. So both those guys are great options, no matter what you need. But you, of course, have more specialties from each of those guys for certain matches. But nonetheless, benching Josh Giddey earlier in the first quarter and then allowing him to come back and lead that secondary group in this more playmaking style, this more playmaking role, I think could really help him turn his season around. And of course, if he does that and he gets hot, then you close with him. If he's not hot, then you bench him like you did against Cleveland. And then you can also mix him back in with that first 5 lineup as the game dictates. But I think that we get so caught up in this 8-game stretch that we forget that Josh Giddey is not even 2 months removed from being at a star level in FIBA of like he was being, touted around the FIBA World Cup as one of the best young players at the event, as a leader of Team Australia and the Boomers who had their best run in program history, really, when you think about it, one of their best runs in their history. And that was 2 months ago. Much less when you point all the way back to the Pelicans game, much less when you point back all the way to that December, January stretch where he was playing like an all-star caliber player for that sample size. Like, we've seen him play much better than this. And I don't think he just simply forgot how to play. We've seen him play much better than this in a Mark Daigneault system. We've seen him play much better than this with Chet Holmgren on the court. We've seen him play much better than this with the other 4 starters on the court as well all of last year. We've seen him do it. He can do it, and I think that he will. Just as he started slow last year. He's going to figure it out. He's going to play through it. Now you can have the conversation of how do you avoid these slow starts, because the slow start was happening the first 8 games of last year, but it also is a trend that happens for like game to game, just starting slow within the game itself. How do you avoid some of that? Like, that is an interesting conversation of how to get over that hump. You can have the conversation of what lineups are best maximizing what the Thunder want to do in the grand scheme of things. But to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one is way too premature over an 8-game sample size. Again, an 8-game sample size that would be completely hidden away had he started out incredibly strong in 8 games and then had a subsequent 8 games where he was just terrible. So it's all about what have you done for me lately? It's all about what the most recent events are. And you also always just have to factor in that there are some people who, even, fans of the team, of course, like even specifically fans of the team, who think that the only way to be objective is with negativity. That's not true at all. Being objective, it doesn't have to look like bashing somebody or being negative or thinking that you are analyzing a game doesn't have to be pointing out flaws or harping on certain issues. It's going to contain that, right? There's going to be players where we're going to talk about Pokusevski here in a little bit. There's going to be players where you do skew more, hey, this is not going well, this is not going good. But the extremes that you get to, it's the same thing that was happening with Lu Dort last year. Last year, for 90% of the season, the same people that you're seeing right now put Giddey out to pasture were the same people who ejected Lu Dort from the face of the franchise this time last year. And now Lu Dort has grown and developed and has found a role to be an incredibly efficient offensive weapon for the Thunder. And we know what he brings defensively. And Lu Dort's had many, many, many more NBA minutes in games played than Josh Giddey. So it can happen. It takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and development is not linear, and all the other catchphrases and cliches you want to use to get down to the basic truth of Josh Giddey is playing bad in these 8 games. He's not playing good. He's not playing up to his standard, the Thunder standard, or anybody else's standard. He's not playing good at all. But these 8 games do not make a career. These 8 games do not define a tenure. And these 8 games, in the grand scheme of things, even within the construct of this season, will not dictate how good or bad he is. From now until April will. But as we saw a year ago, people left last season extremely encouraged by Josh Giddey. And yet he started out just as bad last year. So I think that it's all like everyone always needs, some people always need a negative angle. And there's not much to pick from on this team besides the one guy who's having a really rough go of it right now. And that's just going to be the way it is. You're never going to change that aspect of fandom, of talking sports and basketball and life at times also. But let's just see how it all rides out. There are things that the Thunder, I think, will do and will change, and you have to put the trust in Mark to do it, not blind trust either, trust that I think that he's earned. Now, if nothing changes, right, then we can readdress this conversation. But I think that Mark has earned a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because of his pattern since he's been the head coach, which if you follow the team, you would know that, like, benching Josh Giddey against Cleveland was not some rash new thing. He did it all of last season whenever Josh Giddey didn't have it. Being able to tinker with rotations and when you put guys in, what matchups you put them on, and how you utilize them, that is something that Mark is constantly doing. So letting this team figure it out for longer than 8 games would be strongly advised. So Josh Giddey, to recap, is playing bad. I think that he should stay in the starting lineup, and I think that you could make the strong argument that he should be staggered quicker and should be playing with the bench unit more, but not starting with the bench unit in that way. I think that first 5-man lineup of Shea, Josh, Jada, Dort, Chet, that can still be a really good lineup in the NBA. It's just going to take, of course, Josh Giddey to not be having these bad nights that he's had. And I think that he will turn it around sooner than later, hopefully. And we'll continue to monitor the situation as it goes on. There's just a good balance between what the discourse is right now surrounding Josh Giddey and this Thunder team. Coming up, we're going to talk about the Thunder Kings game in your mailbag questions. But I do want to say right now, today's show is sponsored by Jase Medical. Jase Medical is offering you a Jase case. The Jase case is there to help you and empower you to give you these 5 life-saving antibiotics that can help you in a pinch and can make sure that you are protected and make sure that you are prepared for anything that life throws at you, and you can have access to these life-saving antibiotics in case that you need them. Maybe something pops up late at night and you need help right away. Well, you can be having sure that you have that peace of mind from Jase Medical, JaseMedical.com, code locked on, $20 discount on your order from Jase Medical for the Jase case. You can go there right now and check them out because they have these antibiotics that can save your life and really help you out, and that they are able to help you with consults and with ongoing care, and of course licensed pharmacists who can help you out in this scenario as well. So go to JaseMedical.com, JaseMedical.com, promo code locked on for that $20 discount on your order. Check them out today at JaseMedical.com, JaseMedical.com, $20 discount on your Jase case with those 5 life-saving antibiotics. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Folks, let's get into your mailbag questions. So, FOK asks, when is Kenny Hustle back? Super soon. I think that it is currently refresh season. You go to the injury report website on the NBAofficial.com, whatever the actual URL is. It's like NBAofficial.com. Then you click on injury report, and then away you go. But refresh it. It updates hourly at the bottom of the hour. Refresh it, and I think that pretty soon you'll see Kenny Hustle back. He's getting really close. I would venture to guess it'd be incredibly soon. Now, he's currently listed as out for Sacramento. Again, those things do update hourly, but not too far away, especially as you see him do more and more even in the media viewing of practice. Would growing a beard help Josh Giddey draw fouls? Very interesting question. Very poignant question in the discussion of basketball, and I think that we should take this under consideration. I would love to do a analysis on bearded players versus facial hairless players and who gets more fouls and who doesn't. If you look on the Thunder roster right now, it is interesting. Of all the players who have consistently gotten to the free throw line this year, the face of that, arguably only guy who's consistently gotten to the free throw line per drives, like per capita of drives, is Chet Holmgren. And notoriously, Chet Holmgren, a beard guy. Correlation? Coincidence? I don't know. It's up for you to decide. I'll talk to some officials. I'll ask them, what it takes to get some fouls around here. But Chet Holmgren, beard, gets fouls. SGA, no true beard, no fouls. Think about it. Look, I don't know if Josh Giddey is fortunate enough to be able to grow a beard. Some of us can't, and that's okay. And we should respect people who struggle in the facial hair department, especially in the bearded department. That is a very tough one. Some people got it, some people don't. This is the best I can do in terms of the mustache, but I can't really grow a beard. And if that's the same problem, plugging Josh Giddey, and this is why he's not getting foul calls, I really feel for him. But that's good investigative work for OKC. SGA kind of has that little it's not a soul patch. What's it called? The little goatee type of thing, chin beard type of thing, whatever you want to call it. Maybe he needs to grow like a full blown beard, like Chet, to get to the line. I don't know. We'll continue to track that as we move forward. So we can go now to the next question. Why no minutes for Trey Mann, Micic, and Bertans? Let's break it down. 3 players, 3 quick answers. That was Bertans. Even forgetting the contract stuff, if you didn't know, that the Thunder can't play him in 75% of games, or else they would owe him $16 million. If they play him in less than 75% of games, they only owe him $5 million whenever they do cut him this offseason. So they're going to limit his playing time and make him miss, I believe it's 20 games, to ensure that they only have to cut him for $5 million next year instead of $16 million. Simple financial math. Great stuff there. Now, even forgetting that, pushing that to the side, he is insanely limited defensively, to where the only lineups where you can get him some burn is whenever the other team has a stationary player on the floor. So his two best matchups this season have been when he defends Joe Harris, who just sat in the corner and did literally nothing. He moved less than you or I when he was on the floor offensively in the half court. And then against the Cavs, he faced off with Dean Wade, sort of the same thing there. But the second that those guys are no longer in play and the opposition picks up on Bertans and tries to pick on him, there's really nothing you can do. And I say that there's nothing you can do because there are plenty of bad defenders who are bad because they don't try and they don't give effort and they don't care defensively. Dallas Bertans, you can say that he's bad on defense, and you'd be right. One thing about it is he does try. He does give everything that he has, and he is active defensively. He's just not very good. And that is just how it is. So he's not very good defensively. So with that being said, at best, you're going to play him 10 or 12 minutes a game at most. That is the most you can steal, because whenever you have Bertans on the floor, you are stealing minutes to try to get him on the floor because of what you're sacrificing defensively. And like the other night against Cleveland, his three ball wasn't working. So if that three ball's not on in that 10-minute stretch, then you've really risked a lot for not a ton of reward for at best trying to go with a net neutral time on the floor with Bertans. So, Bertans is just in a point where there's not much you can do to play him. Now, to his credit, he, like the rest of these guys, Micic and Mann, he's done a great job of being a great teammate, and even at shoot around doing kind of silly stuff like the post shooting game that they play, which is a fun thing to observe. He's into it. He's laughing. He's dancing with the Trey Man. He's having a ball out there, even though he's on a string of a few DNP CDs at the time. So credit to him for being engaged with this young team that he doesn't know anything to. He has been here for a New York minute, and he is still locked in and trying to help as best he can with his team, which is encouraging to see, especially after some of the reputation stuff that came with Bertans this offseason. So it's been great, and it's been every time that he's been made available to the media, he's been awesome to talk to and very open and candid with his answers. It's been great, but he's just very limited in what you can do. So that's why you don't see a ton of minutes for him, even though in this utopic world, his three-point shooting is a huge value. It's all the other stuff that really hinders him. Trey Mann, it's a style of play thing, I think, where it's a bit different than the team identity. But when he has been given a very, 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 very small sample size this year, at the end of blowout games, low stakes, of course, he's played well. And again, he deserves a lot of credit for staying ready and also being a really good teammate who's not pouting or anything else whenever he could be as a former first-round pick who is not playing a ton for OKC. Micic has already addressed that he's having a very hard time adjusting defensively. I think that you're going to see the Thunder start to gel him in. And I would just, again, if you are worried about Micic, I know that the Gabriel Deck PTSD is real, but I'd go back and look at last year's October and November lineups and compare them to the end of, to compare them to like March and February lineups and see how they're different, what the Thunder are doing. This is an incredibly long season, folks, incredibly long. Coming up, we're going to get to more of your questions. But first, I want to say right now, we're good friends over at PrizePicks, folks. PrizePicks is great. You can go to prizepicks.com right now /LockedOnNBA. And when you do, you get an instant deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com /LockedOnNBA. Folks, PrizePicks is awesome. It is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And what you can do with PrizePicks is you can combine these sports of, like, if you want to tonight, for example, you can combine the NBA in-season tournament games with a college football game or with a college basketball game. And so you can make these PrizePick projections. And so what I love the most about PrizePicks, though, is it's only you versus the projections. So there's no like crazy and insanely well-versed betting shark who can go and just dominate this pool you're in. It's none of that. It's just you versus the numbers. So you can go and make these games a lot more interesting to watch by going over to prizepicks.com/lockedon. And when you do, all you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players and then just project. Will they have more or less than their prize pick projections? So you can say SGA, will he have more or less than a block and a half? You can say, will Chet Holmgren have more or less than 2.5 blocks? You can put in there, will Josh Giddey have more or less than 8.5 points? You can do a lot of fun stuff over there at PrizePicks with the Thunder, with NBA, with NFL. You can even do cross-sport entries like I mentioned. So if you want to, you can take already Sunday projections for tonight's Friday game. You can take Sunday projections in the NFL and tie them into this Thunder in-season tournament game if you want an entire weekend of sweating out these projections. So check them out today at prizepicks.com. That's prizepicks.com. And you can use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for the first deposit match up to $100. And if you're worried because all you care about is the NBA, and we know in the NBA, you can never really tell who's going to play and who's not going to play, don't worry at all, because PrizePicks has a reboot policy to where if you're a player that you've already entered does not play, or even if they got in for just a second, they're going to make sure you're taken care of on that entry whenever you didn't have a shot at all because of him not playing to win. So make sure you go there right now to PrizePicks and use code LOCKEDONNBA. When you do, it is a $100 deposit match up to $100 for you. So check it out today at prizepicks.com/LOCKEDONNBA. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Smokey says, how do you feel about the Thunder being back and good enough to the point where they are cheated out of games? It feels good that these calls matter, right? The refs have gotten calls wrong from the first time that basketball was ever played in Toronto in the NBA to current day, no matter who's playing, right? In Charlotte games, the calls get wrong. In the biggest of big stages, the calls get wrong. So like the refs blow calls a ton, but to have them actually matter and to actually have them be fodder again is just a sign that like this fan base, this team, this organization is back into relevancy, which is great. And which is fun, and which is great for me personally doing this job that you guys care enough to listen to and to seek out coverage of this team. I really appreciate that. And of course, we're trying to get better every day. Thunderbeard says Draymond Green for 1,000 reasons, Patrick Beverley for Russell Westbrook's knee, Clay for Game 6. Who else is on the Thunder Mount Rushmore of most hated opponents? I'm going to say that Termine guy from SiriusXM. Yeah, that was a great opponent during the rebuild. A lot of battles with him, a lot of hard-fought wars, a lot of black eyes, a lot of punches thrown, shots fired. You know, it was a tough battle. In the end, Oklahoma City came out on top, as they typically do. But respect to the opponent for trying. I hope that he enjoys Charlotte. I hope that he enjoys all that's happening right now with the Buzz City Hornets, and hopefully the new ownership there will give him a fighting chance. But black eyes healed up, put some stakes on it, and ready to go. So I'd say the Tremaine guy is probably the Mount Rushmore of most hated opponents for Thunder fans, along with the names that you mentioned. Who is the most expendable of the guys that are being a consistent DNP to start the season? It's Poku. I mean, look, the Thunder have a history of what they like to do with restricted free agent guys, and it's to move on from them, as they did with Darius Bazley last year. And, through all of the front court issues, Poku didn't find himself in the rotation. Now you have to caveat that with, just because Poku was not on the injury report doesn't mean he wasn't injured, in the sense of, he wasn't ramped up. Like he was not ramped up, and I don't think he's ramped up enough to have truly factored into the rotation and to truly have factored into, the decision-making process to play him heavy minutes when the Thunder lacked front court depth. He was part of the reason why they lacked front court depth, because of the injury he sustained pre-training camp. So he missed all of training camp. He missed all the preseason. So that really limits what you can use him in the early season. And once you get behind the 8 ball, it's hard to catch up, especially whenever in the early season the G League is not happening. So the G League starts tonight, which gives you another avenue to send him or anyone else who's not playing, Trey Mann, anyone else who you want to down there to play. So you saw them do that with the Blue this week, and people kind of questioned why would they do that when the Blue aren't playing. Well, the Blue have been having training camp, and so training camp practices are very intense. They're very hard. They are very like scrimmagey and live, whereas the Thunder are now in season practices where they're very light, and you don't want to do it a whole lot most of the time because you just played a game and you play a game the next day. Very rarely do you have consecutive off days to where the in-season practices are way, way, way light, which is not great for ramping up players who have not gotten to play or who have been injured and are recovering from injury. So that's why you saw Jay Will, Jang, Poku, Trey Mann all go down there during Blue training camps because that they were live and they were scrimmaging because they were in their training camp portion. Now the G League is back and the games tip off tonight. The Blue are playing the Texas Legends tonight. And so that gives you another avenue to help ramp up Poku and anyone else you want to, and the G League, which will help him in general. But last year of his deal, no extension in sight as we all expected. And he's been passed by a little bit by other guys on the roster. You have a huge influx of picks coming in, of course, not just like your mountain of draft picks, but even within the construct of this draft that we're about to see in 2024. And I think that he's obviously the most expendable because I think that we went through like Bertans. Yeah, sure, they're going to cut him at the end of the year, but we already know that, so that's not an interesting answer. Micic, I think that we've addressed how I think he'll get back in the rotation and play heavy minutes for sure. And, of course, he's on a longer contract. And then you're down to Poku and Trey Mann. Obviously, both great answers for this question, but I would be curious to see if we don't end up in the same place with Poku that the Thunder did with Baisley, of seeing him be dealt at the deadline for relative peanuts for the investment on the front end in Poku. But we'll see. Maybe he can be ramped up in the Blue. With the G League here tonight, and he can get ramped up for a couple games, and the Blue come back to OKC next week on Wednesday, and on Monday and Wednesday. So that could be another great time to send him there while you're in town for that Tuesday game against San Antonio. You send him to the Blue for Monday and Wednesday in the front and back into that game. So maybe he can come back from that and play his way like he did last year. He played really well last year. He played at a contributing level last year in the stretches of November, December. Then he, of course, had a devastating leg injury, which decimated his entire season after that. So in the whole course of this Poku experiment, you have 2 really good months, and he's had no chance to prove that those 2 months were legitimate yet. Maybe he gets that chance. I think he will get that chance at some point this season, but he's got to use that time to truly prove that those 2 months were legitimate. He can still do it, but he's for sure very expendable. Just because of the circumstances that he's found himself in with this stop. Now, I believe that he'll get, if this is the end of OKC, as in like this season at some point or in the offseason, I do believe he'll get a shot somewhere else. And I wouldn't close the book on him in OKC at all. I'm just saying that to answer your question, you'd have to be circling Poku right now with this answer. So for all those reasons, it's Poku, but I still believe that Poku can play a really close to what he did in November and December last year. And if he can do that, then he would be worth, a smaller contract extension for OKC. But we'll see if he can actually come through with that once he ramps up from this rehab process. Tonight, the Thunder play the Kings. You can catch that game on SiriusXM. Matt Pinto has the call for the Thunder on the radio. You can also catch the Locked On Thunder podcast there and anywhere else you get your podcast from, including on YouTube. But this is the in-season tournament game number 2 for OKC. It's in Sacramento. The Kings have lost back-to-back games to the Rockets in embarrassing fashion. They have fallen to the Warriors. They currently sit 3-4. The Thunder sit 5-3. The Thunder are looking for their first Western Conference win, which is pretty interesting, just how the schedule fell out. But the Thunder are 0-1 in season tournament group play. The Kings have not played yet in the in-season tournament. This will be their first game in pool play, so it'll be important for them, important for the Thunder. Now, the Kings do not have De'Aaron Fox, which, looking at their depth, is not a great thing at all. I mean, it's going to be a lot on Davion Mitchell, going to be a lot on Keegan Murray, going to be a lot on these, Kings of Sabonis versus Chet, and no Fox does take some of the excitement out of the game as a whole, but it should give the Thunder a bit of an advantage, of course, having Fox out of the lineup and kind of decimating one of the biggest key factors for the Kings in their lineup. Now, the Thunder still list Kenny Hustle as out, but really it's a short injury report for this point in the season. Fox is out, Trey Lyles is out, and Kenny Hustle's out. That's it. Keontae Johnson, of course, is with the Blue as they start their season today. Watch out for any sort of morning announcements on Saw or Waters or Poku or anyone else that you could keep tabs on. Let's see where they're at as the morning unfolds. But ultimately, you're going to have the Kings Thunder tonight in a very big in-season game, in-season tournament game. The Thunder have to win tonight. You know, they should very much be advised to win tonight and get back on the high side in this in-season tournament, and then hope that the Warriors lose their next in-season tournament game and kind of go from there. If you want to make a night out of it, the Thunder on the West Coast, you're going to be staying up late anyway. You can start your night with Minnesota against the Spurs in the in-season tournament pool play for West Group C. That'll be a fun one to watch leading into Thunder Kings. So we'll have it all for you on the recap show tonight. And until then, be good and be good to one another.